All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about a pretty huge showdown. We've got Elon Musk's X on one side and the entire European Union on the other. And trust me, this is way more than just a big fine. This is a fight that could literally reshape the internet as we know it.
So let's start with this number, 120 million euros. Wow. That is the massive fine the European Union just slapped on the social media platform X. And as you can probably guess, it's kicked off an absolute firestorm. And Elon Musk's reaction? Well, it was exactly what you'd expect. Swift and totally uncompromising. He basically said the EU should be abolished. So, yeah, he's not just seeing this as a penalty. For him, this is a fundamental clash of values.
Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at that huge fine, the big fight back it caused, the rulebook behind it all, and whether this is a real threat to free speech. Then we'll get into the two different worlds of speech and what this means for the future of online rules. Let's get into it.
All right, first up, that 120 million euro fine. So why? What exactly did the EU say X did wrong to deserve the first ever fine under its new digital law?
So, the Commission pointed to three specific things. First off, that deceptive blue checkmark. The EU's argument is, look, you can't just let anyone pay for a checkmark and pretend it's real verification. It just opens people up to scams. Second, their ad repository is apparently way too opaque. It's hard to scrutinize who is paying for ads and why. And third, X basically shut the door on researchers, cutting off their access to public data, which really undermines efforts to study systemic risks on the platform.
Okay, so that's the EU's side. Now for the reaction from the US, which was, let's just say, explosive.
Yeah, the argument from prominent U.S. officials wasn't just, oh, this fine is too high. No, they framed this as something much bigger. They see it as a foreign government trying to regulate American rights and stick its nose in American innovation.
And it wasn't just one or two people. You had a whole chorus of high-level American officials jumping in. The message was pretty clear. They see this as the EU attacking American companies, trying to impose censorship, and pushing rules that just don't jive with the American tradition of free speech.
So, to really understand where the EU is coming from, we need to talk about their digital rulebook. It's called the Digital Services Act, or DSA for short. And trust me, this thing is a really big deal.
So what is the DSA? Well, you can think of it as this massive new rulebook for the internet in Europe. It's a landmark regulation, and its whole goal is to create a safer digital world by forcing the big online platforms to take more responsibility for what's on their sites, get rid of illegal content, and basically protect users' rights.
And really, at its core, the DSA is built on a pretty simple idea. What's illegal offline should also be illegal online. The internet shouldn't be some kind of lawless Wild West where anything goes.
But of course, that's not how everyone sees it. For critics, the DSA isn't about safety at all. They see it as a potential blueprint for global censorship. So let's look at their side of things.
So a huge part of the concern comes down to this idea of extraterritoriality. It's a fancy word, but the concept is pretty simple. Because platforms like X operate globally, it's often just easier for them to apply one set of rules, the strictest set of rules, to everyone. So the big fear here is that a law made in Europe could end up deciding what you, me, and everyone else around the world gets to see online.
And this isn't just some fringe theory. You have more than 100 experts who've warned that the DSA could create, and this is their term, a pan-European censorship infrastructure. They worry that its rules are just too vague and that it could be used to shut down totally legitimate debate.
And you can see why companies might get nervous. Just look at the potential penalties. We're talking up to 6% of a company's global annual revenue. For these massive tech giants, that's billions and billions of dollars. With that kind of threat hanging over your head, you can see why they might have a huge financial incentive to just over-censor things to be safe.
So this really brings this whole abstract legal debate right down to your phone, to your computer. It really boils down to a simple question. Could a law made in Europe end up deciding what you get to see online?
And that really gets to the heart of the matter. This isn't just a squabble over one regulation. This is a clash between two fundamentally different ways of thinking about free speech. It's a philosophical showdown between the US and Europe.
Okay, so in the United States, you've got the First Amendment. The whole idea is this marketplace of ideas, right? The belief is that the best way to fight bad speech is with more speech. It's why there's such strong protection for even really offensive speech, like that famous case of neo-Nazis being allowed to march in Skokie. Now, the European approach is very different. It's sometimes called militant democracy. It was shaped by the horrors of the 20th century, and the idea is that you have to protect democracy from speech that's designed to destroy it. So they balance freedom of speech against other things, like human dignity and public safety. That's why you have laws against things like Holocaust glorification in some countries. Two totally different worlds.
So, with both sides completely dug in, what happens now? What's the future of these online rules?
Well, for X, the clock is officially ticking. They've got 60 working days to tell the commission how they're going to fix that blue checkmark mess. And they've got 90 working days to submit a full plan for the ad repository and researcher access issues. If they don't comply, well, they could be looking at even more fines.
But X isn't just waiting around. In what you could call a pretty bold retaliatory move, they've actually blocked the European Commission from running ads on the platform. So this has gone from a legal dispute to a straight-up fight.
And this whole thing really leaves us with one giant question for our digital age. In a world without digital borders, who actually gets to write the rules? Will the internet have one set of rules, probably written by whoever is most aggressive, or are we going to see it splinter into different internets, each one governed by the values of a different global power? It's a huge question, and right now, nobody knows the answer.